back to the natural doctors. In this episode, we're diving deep on what you can actually do, actions to take to prevent dementia. So memory decline, cognitive decline. Everybody's coming in, our patients are coming in, they're asking like, what can I do, right?
Yep.
And so in our last episode, go back and watch it or watch it after this one, we really went into detail about why the dementia is happening in the first place at such high rates, similarly to other things like cardiovascular disease. We had a big talk about inflammation, immune activity in the brain, all that sort of stuff. In this one, we're going to get into the weeds, not on all that technical M1, BDNF, and all that sort of stuff. This one, we're actually going to talk about what do you do, right? Like, what do I eat?
Right.
This is what patients come in and they ask us. They want to know, how should I be eating? What other things do I need to do? You know, I think there's a disservice that's been done where people are just doing crossword puzzles thinking they're going to prevent their dementia, right? Like, oh, I'm doing crossword puzzles. And that's just so low down on the list.
Agreed.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And then a lot of our comments on YouTube are also like, tell me what to eat, right? More nutrition. So that's what we're doing today, you guys. So, okay. We're going to start with something called the Green Mediterranean Diet. So most of you are probably familiar with the Mediterranean diet, but not the Green Mediterranean Diet. This takes it a step further where we're really focusing more on plants. So there was a study done. It was called the Direct Plus study. This was an 18-month trial with about 300 people in it. So, you know, an okay size study.
Like enough that they had enough power in the study that they could actually have some findings, right? And interestingly, these, you know, as we talked about in our last episode, people who are going to be at higher risk of having dementia can already be having problems with obesity, metabolic control, this dyslipidemia. And in this study, those are the patients they actually enrolled in the study. So it's actually a pretty good group of patients. And they unfortunately were mostly men, but 30s to 80s, so pretty big range. And did it long enough, like 18 months. And
it's a long time.
You know, we're able to collect some really important information here.
Exactly. So we had 3 groups. The first group, standard diet. The second group had a traditional Mediterranean diet. And then the third group had this green Mediterranean diet, right? And so this green Mediterranean diet is essentially your classic Mediterranean, more polyphenols. So we're going to talk a lot about polyphenols in this, and less red meat, essentially.
And a little bit of caloric restriction. I think to point down here too, because we do want to consider calories here.
Exactly. Okay. So some of the really interesting results from this: 14% reduction in visceral fat. If you've watched some of our previous episodes, especially our episode on metabolic inflammation, you know we've talked about visceral fat. Visceral fat is that fat that surrounds your organs. It's very inflammatory, and it is associated with pretty much all chronic diseases. So we can definitely make the assumption that reducing that visceral fat reduces your risk of cognitive decline and dementia. Okay. They used MRI, so imaging, to actually show that brains were looking younger in this group as well. And so we found that for every 1% decrease in body weight that was lost, you had a brain that was 9 months younger.
Which is amazing, right? That is a really big deal. And I don't think this is comparable in any way to some of the drug trials.
No.
And certainly side effects, none. Okay. So we're not having to, do high intervention here.
Before we start talking about, okay, what do these people actually eat? Any other findings you want to highlight, or?
I mean, the big things when we were looking at, when they were looking at an MRI that were pointed out here was that there was less brain atrophy. So as, brains are aging and they're, inflamed, basically, put it this way, that can cause basically shrinking of the brain, right? And I get this back on MRI reports all the time. And so it'll just be like age-related atrophy, but your brain's shrinking. So there was actually less brain atrophy in this study as well. The younger brain age and more hippocampal occupancy, they called it, which is basically the hippocampus is your memory center. So that's really important here too.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. So these are really significant findings for a study on nutrition. Like this is just food, you guys.
For 18 months.
Yeah. This is a really big deal. Okay. So what are we eating on this diet? First and foremost, we're eating healthy fats. So think about things like your wild fish, like your mackerel, your salmon, if you like sardines and anchovies, your olive oil, your extra virgin olive oil, avocados, nuts, and seeds. Huge piece of it. Colorful vegetables. We're looking at 7 to 10 servings per day. I know you are not eating 7 to 10 servings. We're eating 7 to 10 maybe, right? No, but
a serving is going to be about a half a cup, right? So now we're talking about like 5 cups of vegetables, right?
Not too bad. You can do that, especially if you're doing mixed greens, like dark leafy greens. That's not too bad. But particularly with an emphasis on some cruciferous vegetables as well. Those are things like Brussels sprouts, kale, broccoli, cabbage. Those are great. Cruciferous vegetables. Our berries, our blueberries and our blackberries, these strawberries, raspberries, right? These have certain polyphenols or antioxidants called anthocyanidins, which are very powerful for increasing that BDNF that we talked about in our last episode, this brain-derived neurotropic factor, right? So really important part of our diet.
And then we have one of your favorite things on here as well. It's fermented foods.
My favorites. Yes.
Kimchi, sauerkraut. These are going to be really helpful in rounding out the health of that diet. And again, although they, didn't study the microbiome specifically in this trial, we understand how this contributes with that gut-brain axis, right? And then we have herbs and spices, and we're always encouraging people to use plenty of herbs and spices. These can be dried herbs and spices in your cabinet, fresh as well, things like rosemary, oregano, turmeric, cinnamon. And these are powerhouses of antioxidants, polyphenols, things like rosemary, growing herbs. I always talk about that as well. You can grow them inside in the winter. You can have a little herb garden if you don't feel like you can take on gardening like at a higher level. A lot of times people can manage to pull off a little, kitchen herb garden. And, think about in your meals, where can you put that, right? Like, can I snip a little like oregano on here? Can I put a little mint on here? That's really important. And then
in small amounts. Like, these don't have to be huge amounts.
Exactly. So it's a really small quantities that you need there. And then a huge component in this diet that was emphasized is green tea. Right? So EGCG is this really great, powerful antioxidant polyphenol in green tea. And we're talking about 3 to 4 cups daily of green tea, right? And now if you have matcha, there's going to be higher levels of EGCG in there. So maybe you can get away with a little bit less there, but we're talking like a good amount of green tea during the day. One little tip, if you're, drinking green tea, and the traditional method is that, you do a hot steep, but not fully boiling, like pretty hot steep. Drink that. You're going to get a lot of the EGCG with that, but then you re-steep it. So that's going to pull out a little bit more of those compounds. And, but you're going to want to do this 3-4 times a day.
Exactly.
So this is this will count towards your water though. So that's a bonus there. So you don't have to drink, 8 glasses of water on top of that. And then the last couple of things, dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate. Huge, I mean, we got to mention this one, right? My favorite. And again, like, we're not talking about copious amounts of dark chocolate here, but like, it's okay. Like, let that be, your treat for the day. Have a square of dark chocolate. It's great. Lots of flavonoids in there, polyphenols.
And we know that's good for cardiovascular health as well. And then,
and like we're talking like 70%.
Yeah, like it has to be the really good low sugar, high cacao powder. And then legumes.
Legumes, yeah. So this is, we talk about diet all day long. We're always asking people what they eat. And people are not eating a lot of legumes. And I think part of it is because they're worried about feeling bloated from eating beans. And so if that's you, go see a naturopath so they can help you with that, because beans really are so good for us. And, beans, your lentils, your chickpeas, black bean, whatever kind of beans you want, right?
Yeah.
But so delicious. And again, those are supplying our gut with these complex carbohydrates that the bacteria in our gut ferment, and then they create these really awesome short chain fatty acids. So it's just great for our gut health.
Right. Good for your gut and also good for your brain, because we know that gut-brain connection. Now, in this study, there was also a specific amount of walnuts used daily. So we did touch on the oils, but in this specific study, it was, the key criteria, Mediterranean diet, which we told you what that specifically looks like, but the key pieces of this were high in polyphenols, which meant 3 to 4 cups of green tea daily, half a cup of something called mankai powder. So this is a strange little thing. When I first learned about it, I'd never seen it before. Same. And it's an aquatic plant that grows in Asia. And now, of course, companies are growing it and, growing it hydroponically. And it's very, very high in protein, a complete protein. So this is a plant.
Right.
That a lot of times with plants, we don't see a complete protein in some of these cases, which is why you have to mix like a legume and a grain together, like rice and beans. But this is a complete protein and really high in omega-3s and iron and B12.
It's great.
Right? Yeah. And then it's polyphenol itself. So that was an interesting piece in this study. That was a half a cup daily.
And potential substitutes for this, like if you're like, okay, I'm not.
Or where's the mankai powder? I
know. Spirulina, which is readily available, chlorella. These are really nutrient-dense powders as well that have similar profiles. A little bit goes a long way.
Right. So you can put that in a smoothie. That's how a lot of people will use that. And then with the walnuts, 28 grams, which is about a quarter cup.
Yep. Yeah. It doesn't take a lot.
No red processed meat, basically. Very low, limited amounts there. And then, of course, we're telling you all the things that are in there. Obviously, there are things you avoid, right?
Yes. So what are we avoiding here? And again, this isn't going to be a surprise to any people, but sugar and refined carbohydrates, right? And then, another thing that I run into clinic a lot, because we're in this kind of like high protein situation right now, really, I think what we need to focus on is just lowering our carbohydrate servings and really understanding what a serving of a carbohydrate is, right? That's a huge piece. So yes, we want to avoid the refined carbohydrates, but when you are having carbohydrates like rice, for example, half a cup. All you need, right? It's not a lot, right?
Yeah, and once you get to the point where you're insulin resistant, a lot of times we're really even cutting that a little bit more. It might be a quarter of a cup we're dealing with, and always making sure that's balanced with some healthy fats and fiber and protein, so it lowers that glycemic load. Great episode, a little bit back, a couple of episodes back, all about glycemic load. So go back and look at that one.
Of course, processed foods, right? Ultra processed foods, really trying to reduce seed oils. Those are really hard to completely avoid, but doing our best there. Trans fat, that's really not around anymore. But, making sure we're not eating any of that.
I'm usually not running into that with patients.
Definitely not.
And then alcohol, right?
This is a big one, a really big one. This came up for me today in clinic. We got to stop. We really have normalized alcohol way too much. And
it is. It's neurotoxic. We do know that. And then it also disrupts the lymphatic system. So we talked about that in our last episode. And the lymphatic system is basically the lymph system, clearage system, where we get rid of waste in the brain, and that's really active overnight. Yeah. So, you know, if you're drinking alcohol, then going to bed, your lymphatic system's not working, and you're not getting into those deep sleep cycles, right? So you're not getting that restorative sleep, and that's what we need for brain health. So that combination really is, you know, straight up neurotoxic, unfortunately.
Definitely. Okay, so I think that's pretty good for the Green Med diet. We want to just briefly touch upon a little bit of research on other dietary patterns that we have going on here. So a ketogenic diet, we do have some research, particularly in people who are ApoE positive. We haven't really talked about this yet. This is a genetic marker you can have tested. It's actually very easy to test. And so depending on, you know, there are different phenotypes of this gene and some that are more strongly correlated with risk of dementia. So if you have one of those genotypes, then there is some research that shows that a ketogenic diet can be beneficial.
Yep.
We also know that ketogenic diets can improve mitochondrial dysfunction. So we talked a lot about that in our last episode as being a driver of cognitive impairment and dementia. Intermittent fasting. So when done correctly, you and I are both fans for the most part of intermittent fasting. And we know that this can trigger our autophagy, which is that cellular cleanup, right? Cleaning up that cellular debris. It stimulates BDNF, which we talked about. It enhances that lymphatic clearing system. So really working with your provider on a good schedule of intermittent fasting.
Right. And that could be like, if I was thinking about it, I know like ketogenic diets for most people are hard to sustain, right? But if you're out there and you're doing a ketogenic diet, you know, there's some good research here that could be helpful for dementia prevention, and especially if you are ApoE4 positive. On the flip side, it seems the evidence is really coming together on the green Mediterranean diet, but that could also be combined. We could layer this up a little bit and combine it with intermittent fasting, right? So
perfect.
I would suggest combining both of those, right? And then when we think about intermittent fasting, this gets, you know, a little bit, I don't know, confusing for patients, and they want to know how long and when to eat and what are we talking about skipping days and fasting. So there's a lot of different methods in here. So we can, you know, time restricted eating, where you're eating in a 16 or eating within a 6 or 8 hour window, and then either fasting like 18 or 16 hours.
Right.
You kind of need at least that to really get that cellular cleanup going on, right? And to improve that insulin sensitivity.
Yeah. And once, you know, you feel good doing that, right? Then you can work with a provider, maybe doing a 24-hour water fast, 3 days. We're big fans of the Prolon 5-day fasting mimicking diet as well. So there are a lot of options there now.
Yeah. And it's interesting, if you're anyone out there who has done Prolon, I've done it quite a bit. The fasting mimicking diet, really I always notice by day 3, definitely into day 4, the mental clarity that you get, because they've studied this really, you know, in detail, and the autophagy really kicks up into like full gear by day 3. So then it makes a lot of sense by day 4. You're waking up and you're going like, oh, okay, wait, I can think a lot more clearly. And this is even if you haven't even been eating that badly, right? That you can have these noticeable changes. So pretty interesting stuff.
All right. We wanted to be a little bit more tangible here and give you a couple of meals. Like if you were doing this Green Med diet, what would some meals look like? So we're going to read those to you. So first meal is a brain boosting breakfast bowl. So your base can be some cooked quinoa or some steel cut oats, about a half a cup of one of those.
Cooked, not raw.
Cooked, not raw. Yeah. And quinoa, like if you've never experimented with quinoa before, I run with my patients like a cleanse or a detox that we do. And quinoa is a big part of that. And so many people are like, oh my gosh, I've never cooked quinoa, and it is delicious and so easy. And so if you've not tried quinoa before, you should. So then, you know, you can add some ground flaxseed, maybe some spirulina, or, you know, that mankai powder, if you can get your hands on some of that. Add in some healthy fats, add some walnuts on top of that, right? Mix in some berries, whatever berries you like. And then you can add some spinach in there. You can blend it in, right? So the whole idea is you're putting all this in a blender, blending it up, except like you can top it with the berries and the walnuts and things. You can add some cinnamon in there if you want to go more for a savory. Add some turmeric, just a little bit, delicious, right? And then you can blend it if you need a little bit of milk, coconut milk, almond milk is fine, or you can just use some water because you've got some great flavor in there.
Yeah.
Voila. Delicious, right? Pair that with a little matcha.
Right. So
on
you get
the side.
a little green tea, get it going, right?
Yep.
So you want to get that green tea. Now, we did talk about 3 or 4 cups of green tea a day. So if you are someone, green tea does have some caffeine in there.
A little bit.
So if you are caffeine sensitive, then you're going to want to try to like concentrate those into the first part of the day. So you might be having 2 cups in the morning and another one at lunchtime even. Yeah. Again, if you're super caffeine sensitive, you know, like maybe you can't even have that much. But if, you know, you can tolerate it, then there's good outcomes we're seeing with it.
Yeah. All right, next option we have is kind of a Mediterranean power salad, right? And so your salad base here, you can do 3 cups of dark leafy greens mixed. We're big fans of arugula on this show. We love arugula, but spinach, kale, whatever you like. Add some broccoli sprouts or microgreens on top of that. I started growing my own sprouts.
So good.
Really fun. Cherry tomatoes, cucumbers, red onion, avocado, some pomegranate seeds. You and I love pomegranate seeds. We're always eating those.
Yep, they're good for your gut bacteria.
Yep. And then adding in some hemp hearts or even some pumpkin seeds on there for a little bit more crunch.
Sounds awesome.
Add your protein, right? I'm like, I'm gonna make this for dinner.
Wait,
this is what I eat every day.
Yeah.
Add your protein on there, chickpeas or beans. You could do some salmon, some tempeh, right? Or, you know, some chicken, whatever you like there. And then a nice green tea vinaigrette, which olive oil, some green tea, lemon, Dijon, garlic. Amazing. This is so good. Put some fresh parsley on it. It's perfect.
Right. Get your herbs in there that way.
Yep. And then as a third option, you could do like a turmeric lentil vegetable stew, adding in like a bit of a walnut pesto. So pesto is a really great way to get in healthy fats because you can use any nut as your base here. It doesn't have to be like that traditional pine nut. Yeah. But you could do walnuts. I've done that so many times and it's so delicious. So cook up your lentils. You can do green lentils, red lentils, whatever you want there. Lots of vegetables. So a stew like this is a great way to pack it with veggies. So Swiss chard, kale, zucchini, peppers, tomatoes. Add in your veggie broth, your tomatoes, lots of fresh garlic, fresh ginger.
And get your spices in there, right? This is like whenever you're doing stews and soups, it's a great way to load in spices, right?
Your curcumin or turmeric, right? Your cumin, a little bit of salt and pepper, paprika, olive oil, lemon juice, right? Like,
and olive oil, a good kind of tip about olive oil is that itself is a source of polyphenols as well. So we are always thinking about olive oil and you're focused on the oil itself. But some of the research now is really teasing out with olive oil that a lot of the benefits are probably coming from the green pigment, which are polyphenols in there. So now it's starting to make a lot of sense why olive oil is so good for us.
Yes, love it. So nitty gritty when it comes to nutrition and I'm starving.
Well, it sounds like a good day. Yeah. I'm like on board for that.
Same.
Okay.
All right, we have a couple minutes left. So Dr. Jen, I'm going to test you a little bit here.
Okay.
I want you to rate these supplements for brain health. Okay. Tell me what you think on a scale of 1 to 10.
Okay.
10 being like, that is stellar for brain health. 1 being like, no, not going to cut it.
Okay.
Omega-3 fatty acids.
Okay, 10.
Yes,
right.
So good.
And high levels, right?
Doses.
So we also want to be testing with that. That's a key I'll say here is like get an omega-3 level, omega check done. And we want to see levels over 8 now. And there's actually good research showing, especially for women, lower rates of dementia when you're keeping your omega-3s up. So 10, 10, all the way.
I love it. I agree. What do we think about magnesium? Maybe magnesium glycerophosphate, which is the type
there you go.
Might not know about.
I would say I'd put I probably wouldn't put it as high as a 10, but it's up there. Let's say 8. But with the restriction or limitation that the type of magnesium matters when it comes to the brain. So the only type that actually has been shown in human studies to transfer to the brain is glycerophosphate. So magnesium glycerophosphate. We actually like using a formula, Actimag Neuro, that has a little bit of Bacopa in there as well. So,
so great.
That combination maybe is getting close to a 10.
That's a really good one. All right. What do you think about resveratrol for brain health?
Yeah, I mean, there's research on it. I wouldn't say it's a 2, but it's pretty expensive. So if I was going to start like choosing supplements and also not giving patients pill fatigue, I'd probably put it in a 4 or 5 level. Great. Because I would put a lot of other ones ahead of it, but not like, oh, you're wasting your money level.
Got it. I gotcha. Okay. What are we thinking about a generic CVS brand curcumin?
0. First of all, because we don't know, okay? Like, we don't know, does that even contain what it says on the label? Is this even turmeric? You know, all that sort of stuff. So we want to get a good quality. I think, yes, like good quality turmeric from a reliable manufacturer, I would put that up in the high level. So like definitely above 5, maybe. And there are some nice formulas with turmeric in there that are good for brain health, but maybe like 7 or 8 too.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. What else do I want to ask you? Okay. Prevagen, your classic late night commercial. So many of my elderly patients ask me, like, should I be getting Prevagen for brain health? I say this is a 0 because there's literally no studies on this. I was like, what are they talking about? I had multiple patients ask me. I'm like,
you're like, you're not up late.
I'm not up late watching these things. I've never heard of this before. I'm like, there's no research on this. So please do not fall victim to these late night commercials.
Like, it's expensive. And and a lot of times I've had patients ask the same thing as well. And a lot of times they're also, the other thing I would say is like, don't put all your eggs in one basket and think like a supplement like that is going to fix your dementia if you're starting to have problems. So we need to do all those things first. But there are some really targeted supplements that are going to be helpful, like the omega-3s and
Exactly. Any other supplements you can think of that you would be like, oh, okay, this is good.
So probably I think there's some promising information on like lion's mane.
Oh yeah.
Right?
That's a great one.
Like the fruiting body and the mycelium as well. So I'd probably put that like next in line. That's definitely a consideration there. Love the mushrooms. But that one specifically for brain health.
Good stuff. Couldn't agree more. All right, we're getting kicked out. Our time is up. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found that helpful. Remember, if you didn't see the first episode about dementia, go back, take a look at that. Also, our other episodes really applicable here. Everything we've done on inflammation, huge. So make sure you take a look at those. We are the Natural Doctors. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode.
Nutmeg TV has been providing community television for over 30 years. We needed some studio upgrades, and Ion Bank believed in us. You're working with partners who understand who you are, and Ion Bank does that. It's community banking at its best.